All right, and we're back with our next installment of Live with Dave Palumbo. I'm going to be your host today, as always, Anthony Pasquale. I'm the one person that he trusts to take over the con and do the interviewing. Never scripted, never talking about it in advance. Dave, how you doing?
Great, Anthony. Yeah, it's our excuse. You know what it is? We're friends, but we don't. Sometimes you have friends like you just never get a chance to talk to because you're always both of you so busy. This is like our alone time, so to speak. We do every once a month or so.
Yeah, it's also the one time of the week that you don't have to think about the content you're going to create.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, we only live like an hour and a half from one another, but when you have three kids under the age of like 6 in a COVID world, this is about as good as we can do.
Yeah, if we didn't have COVID, you'd certainly be coming down here. All right, let's see what you got for me today.
All right, let's see here. All right, so we're going to start with something today. I've been following, a lot of people have been following you for a really long time. I remember back when you had your column at MD. I think one of the years you either featured a BMW or a Mercedes you had. We're talking back in the early 2000s. My question for you to start today is, what was your first car and what got you into cars and speed and all that? Like, walk me through all of that stuff.
That's a good question. It's funny because in school, when I was in school, kids would have car magazines back in the 80s and, maybe even into the very early 90s. Everyone had like their favorite car and kids would have these Matchbox cars and I didn't have any because it didn't interest me because I couldn't buy them. So for some reason, like I didn't want to know from them, it was like out of sight, out of mind. And even when I got into my early 20s, I left medical school, so I had a lot of debt. I had 120 grand in debt to pay off, even more than that actually, with all the interest. And I was driving this Pontiac Grand Prix that was kind of nice. My father and I decided we were going to buy it because I think my father didn't want to drive me to Pennsylvania, to school. So he said, "I'll get him a car." So I had some money saved, and he threw some in, and we bought this Pontiac Grand Prix. And it was like 2 years old when I got it, but I drove it for like 10 or 12 years or something like that. So I never wanted to know from cars because it had no relevance in my life. And then I guess when I finally paid my it took me about 5 or 6 years to pay off my student loans. I was chucking tons of money, everything I was making. I would get like a check from like a promoter for $2,500, send it to the government, that kind of thing. So when I paid all that off and I actually got out of my dad's house, because I had moved back to my dad's house after I left medical school, I started having some money saved now, and I'm like, I might want to buy a new car because my car was like on its last legs. And I bought this like used, like someone had left a BMW at a transmission shop that my friend worked at, and they had taken possession of it on like a mechanic's lien. It was like a 525i or something like that. It was from the 90s. And it was about 10 years old. But those BMWs, they run forever. So I put a little work into it. I fixed it up a little bit. And I was driving that, and it was like, and that was an older car, and it was still like driving like a bicycle versus a Harley. It was like, and I really loved the whole German engineering and the comfort of it. So I said, when I finally had saved up enough money to actually buy a new car, because I'd never had a new car my whole life, just a couple of used cars, because it wasn't important to spend the money on it. I said, I want to get a BMW. So the first BMW I bought, believe it or not, was a new 520, I think it was a 528i or something like that, which is like their sedan. And I bought that, and then right after that, believe it or not, because I was with my ex at the time, and that was kind of like her car. And then I bought an 850 Ci, which I had always wanted because I knew that like Gary Stridham had one back in Venice Gulch. I remember seeing him driving around the streets in a black, or I think it was, I don't remember if it was white or black, but it was that like futuristic front end. It was like a big 2-door coupe, and it was a 12-cylinder engine. I'm like, I got to get that car. So I found it. They had it at a dealership somewhere in Westchester, and I went up there and I actually bought the car. It was it was like half the price that they normally were, but it was still like, it had only like 8,000 miles on it. It was like, I love this car. And that was my love affair with cars started then. And then I got in 2000, I got the first new BMW M5 that had come out, which was like the souped up 5 Series. It was 400 horsepower, which at the time was like, there was nothing 400 horsepower you can get aside from like a Ferrari or something like that. And it was like, you could drive it to the supermarket. It was a 4-door sedan with like a souped up engine. BMW kind of like came up with this great idea. We're going to put a big engine in a 4-door, sedan, and it worked great. And everyone does it today, and everyone copies it then. So, and that was my love affair with cars. I went from BMWs, and then BMW kind of changed the styling at some point in the mid '90s, and I kind of got or I should say, yeah, it was probably like towards the late 90s. And I got, oh, no, excuse me, this was early 2000s, and I kind of got turned off by it. So I switched to Mercedes, and I started buying their AMG cars, which was basically a knockoff of the BMW M5, the motorsport vehicles. The AMG was their tuner, and they were doing like 500 horsepower, I think, at the time in their sedan, and I got that, and I had those for a number of years, 10 to 12 years up until recently, until when I had my kids, and then it's not practical anymore. You need car seats in there, and I switched to an X3 first, and then an X5. I went back to BMW, and right now I have an X5, but I think because I have 3 kids now with big car seats, I think I'm going to go to I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I think I'm going to buy an American car. I think I'm going to go to a Lincoln Navigator or something like that. Because it's funny, because BMW makes an X7, which is their 7 Series, like, big, SUV. But the funny thing is, if you put car seats in the second row, you can't get to the third row because you can't recline the seat down. It's the dumbest engineering of all time. BMWs are about driving. They don't care about cup holders and car seats and shit like that. That's not important. The Germans think we're ridiculous with the cup holders and all the things, the accoutrements that we need in the car. They're about just driving. And so I got to go to the American cars, which cater to the American family, that kind of thing.
Now, here's my question for you as a follow-up on it, because I feel like I know you skipped over it. I think at one point you even had a Honda Odyssey in the driveway.
I still have a Honda Odyssey. We have. That's my wife's car. Yeah, we have a minivan.
Odyssey.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a guy at the BMW dealership I was telling him how I had to trade my Mercedes E63 AMG all-wheel drive in for a Honda minivan, and he's like, yeah, there was another guy here. He actually returned. He had a McLaren. The guy. A McLaren and an X7. He turned them in, and he got 2 Honda minivans. And he did the same thing. I went to Honda, and I was like, all right, fine, I got to get a minivan, right? I said, I want the best. I wanted everything you could possibly put in this thing. I want the highest end one possible, with the leather seats and all the entertainment center. So at least I had the best minivan that you could make, as opposed to having the lower end one. But you know what? At some point, and people don't realize this, and I didn't realize it, when you have kids, it's all about functionality and how quickly you can get them in the car and how fast you can get them out of the car and how comfortable they are in the car, because then they won't torture you as much in the car on the car ride. So that's what it's about now. And I always say this, when you have kids, it's no longer about you anymore. It's about them. And that's why I waited until I was 48 to have my first kids, because I knew that I was very selfish and I wasn't ready to turn over my shit for them. And so I had to wait till I hit that point where I was ready to say, okay, you know what? Dave's not important anymore. Now it's about the kids. And so that's why.
My only question for you is, so back in these bodybuilding days, single Dave, were you a fat bastard? Did you eat your McDonald's in the car sometimes, or were you neurotic and you'd only go inside?
I was like you. I'm not like I am now. Now I'll eat in the car. I would literally, and you might not believe this, but I would clean the rims every single day. So I would get back from wherever I was going for the day, the gym and all my little routes, and I would get the spray thing, and I'd spray all that stuff to melt the brake dust off it. I would clean the rims, and I'd actually usually wash the car, armor all the seats, vacuum. Like if there was a crumb, like the size of an ant in my car, I would have a nervous breakdown. I have to like pick it out and throw it out. Now I could care less, especially in the winters in New York. I would get the special rubber mats to cover everything, and I was a neurotic. And at one point I had 3 really nice cars, and I actually built. I wasn't in a house. I was the original. I had an original house in Seaford that I had bought, also on the water, and it didn't really have a functional garage because I was breeding cats, and I had turned that into a cat room. So on the side of my house, on my neighbor's fence, he didn't care, I built a 3-car long garage, so 3 cars in a row, and I mirrored the whole thing, and I heated it too. I heated it and I air conditioned it. So I mean, literally, if you didn't put cars in there, it could have been a gym. That's how nice it was in there. So.
Wow. Very good. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I bet the listeners finally learned something new today. They got to learn something new.
Look, when I was into my cars, I was obsessed, and every time I knew, like with BMW especially, they had a tuning. People, like, what was the company? A company that like would tune the cars called Dynan, and Dynan would do aftermarket stuff. But the great thing is they had an arrangement with BMW, so if you did any Dynan upgrades, they actually it didn't void your warranty. So every time Dynan came out with like a new hot air, a cool air cooler or new pipes for the exhaust or a new exhaust system. I was upgrading constantly too. So it was like every 3 months I was bringing it in and doing something new to it, which was crazy, but when you get obsessed with something, when I'm obsessed with something, when I'm into something, I go all out. I have to have the best of the best, and that's just my mentality. And I want to know everything about it, and then when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I move on to the next thing, and that's how you have to be. If you want to be good at what you do in life, you got to really immerse yourself in what you're into at the time.
That's actually a perfect segue, because my next question for you is, I don't know if people ever bring this to your attention, if you're consciously aware of this, but if people that have followed you for a while ever hear your stories, there's a consistent theme in them, meaning, and people that know you personally, like I have for 10 or 15 years behind the scenes, you're not a guy that ever is worried about what another YouTube channel was doing or another bodybuilding channel was doing, or, we live in a world where more and more I hear, or we all experience, fear of missing out. But I've never talked to you and got the impression, it's like you do your game, whatever it is. Like, where does that come from you? Because that's not natural. We live in a world where the game stops and the Bitcoin, and you're not ever a guy who seems to give a shit about any of the stuff other than what you're doing. And where does that come from, and how do you manage that in your own head, or do you suffer from it sometimes?
Yeah, well, you don't hang out with me at like 4 a.m. when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, because because I have to have talks with myself about that, because I am very competitive, and I'm also want to be on top of everything, and I realize that social media and YouTube is so overwhelming now that it's even if I didn't have kids, it's impossible to be on top of what everyone's doing, okay? And it really doesn't matter what anyone's doing. I had this talk last night at 4:30 in the morning with Wayne Dyer. This is, who's no longer with us, okay? So I had this as I'm meditating, trying to get myself relaxed to go to sleep, I'm talking to Wayne Dyer, who I realize is really like God or my subconscious, whatever you want. And he's telling me, he goes, do what you like doing. That's what you're here for. To do what you like. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's about whatever gives you pleasure. Okay. So if something gives you pleasure, okay, do it. If it doesn't give you pleasure, no. Like, 'cause I'm always wondering, should I take my channel in a different direction, and should I do more motivational stuff and more deeper spiritual stuff? And the answer to that question that came back to me is, if that's what you want to do, then do it. If you like to argue with these, imbeciles online, then argue with the imbeciles online. If you want to do both, do both. There's no right or wrong. There's no less spiritual path or more spiritual path. It's just what you're enjoying at the moment. If at the moment this is what you enjoy, do it. If 2 years from now you're sick of dealing with a certain aspect of what you're doing and you want to change directions, then that's what you do. If you don't want to do social media or YouTube anymore and you want to stop it and write a book, then do that. It doesn't matter because I like something, or I dislike, or I like something and you dislike something. Like, I might say, well, I'm living my dream. And you might say, well, your dream sucks. That's a horrible. Well, yeah, to you it might suck because that's not your dream. And that's great. You live your dream. This is my dream. And that's what you have to keep in the back of your head, that it's not about what other people think. Because if you're doing what you like and someone else doesn't like it, that's fine, because everyone likes different things. They don't have to like what you like. You only have to like it. And so I have to keep sometimes reminding myself that don't worry about what everyone else is doing. You don't have to answer every single person who ever mentions your name. If it's important enough to you to do that or respond to someone, then do it. But don't feel obligated. And otherwise you will overwhelm yourself. And then what will happen is you stop doing the good stuff that you actually enjoy doing, and that the people who want to watch you do enjoy watching. And so don't let the good opinion of others influence how you live your life. And if you do that, number one, you'll be happy. Number two, you'll be successful, because you'll be happy. And when you're happy, you're successful. And number three, guess what? No one cares, okay? Really, at the end of the day, if you've responded to every single person that has ever said anything with you or is on top of their own subjects. Like, there's a lot of guys out there, I'll give you for instance, and this might be a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of people that go into the new, and I talked about this in my other Ask Dave this week, about the nuances of a lot of different new drugs and new neurochemicals and because there's a lot of research out there. And if you can Google shit all day long and look up stuff on these journal articles about the newest this, the newest that. And what a lot of these channels are based on is they take some kind of new study and they'll just go over it. Maybe so the person sounds, intelligent, or maybe just because it's cool to report on it. Hey, this new neurochemical does this, and if you take this dosage, and according to the research, it shows this and this. But a lot of it doesn't have any real world application, meaning that it's a cool exercise in science and learning about how different stuff interacts within the body. As we learn these new things, but it might not really affect anyone's performance. You might not get any real muscle gains or any real fat loss out of it or real mental focus out of it. It just might be interesting that in this test tube or in this particular study for 3 days it showed this or that and this chemical interacts. So, you can get caught in that whole world, and that's a whole nother thing. Some people like to learn about the latest and greatest, and they'll watch a channel like that. That's not really what I do. What I do is I'm an educator. I'm trying to take complex, subjects like diet, how to build muscle, lose muscle, performance-enhancing drugs that we know work very well, steroids and growth hormone and insulin, IGF-1, thyroid hormone, and explain in simplistic terms how to utilize these things responsibly, safely, giving the people the risk-to-benefit ratios, and break it down for people on a regular basis so that they understand how to combine these things and do these things to get effective results. And that's real life application. And that's what my forte is in. Explaining real life applications so that people can transform and change because if Mrs. Jones or Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Potts, comes to me and says, I got to lose 50 pounds, he doesn't want to know about neurochemical X in the brain and how it might affect, his ability to read a book, because that has no real world application. He just wants to get this fat off his stomach and lower his cholesterol level so he doesn't die, Or he wants to do a show and transform his body and show people how he went from terrible to amazing, and that's a different level of video instruction or video, information that I'm putting out there than someone else. So if I got caught up in what everyone else is doing, it would take me away from what I am doing. So you have to have a focus on what do you do? What are you known for? Stick with that. If people want to take pot shots, he doesn't really know, but that's fine. It doesn't matter what other people think. Do what you do and do it well.
Yep. Within the context of training, and I'm actually curious to hear what your answer is for this. I'll give you mine first.
Sure.
When you were, pick an age, 32, 35, in your peak of your bodybuilding, 35-year-old Dave, if you were to basically knowing what you know now, what would be the number one piece of training advice you would give him? And my answer I'm a pretty young guy. I'm 37 now, but 30-year-old me when I was training, the number one piece of advice I would have given myself now with my back problems and stuff is I wish I had stretched out my hamstrings, my legs a lot more, because that stiffness compounded, and that's what created a lot of problems later on. I underestimated that importance of stretching for myself. Right. What would be the answer for you?
It's a very tough question. I'll tell you why. Because I think that young Dave, and remember, I stopped competing at about 34, 35. So I went from early 20s to I had about a 13-year run, but I still trained. Obviously, I wasn't competing though. But so I think that young Dave would have risked some of the more dangerous exercises I did that hurt me later, that caused a lot of my injuries later, because I knew that they were necessary to build the muscle that I built. So if you said to young Dave, knowing what I know now, hey Dave, maybe it's not a good idea to shoulder press behind the neck 315 for 6 reps during shoulder day. And I would have said, young Dave would have said, old Dave, I don't think I'm never gonna build massive delts like you built, old Dave, without doing that. And even though I know that I'm gonna need shoulder replacements later, I know that I need this to build those monstrous delts because I don't have a lot of structural width. I need to overcompensate with that, and I wouldn't be able to argue with that with young Dave because he'd be right. So I don't know if I would have changed too many things. I might have lowered my volume a little earlier in my career, probably. The one thing I probably wouldn't have done is maybe kept pursuing massive amounts of size with crazy, insane heavy weights after I hit a certain point. Like once I was 300 pounds, I probably could have modified my training a little bit, and it wouldn't have mattered in terms of the quality of muscle I had, and maybe that would have prevented some injuries, or maybe maybe if I was eating an enormous amount of food, maybe I would have cut back my volume of food. But I don't know. I needed it to get that big, so it's hard. It's hard. I did a lot of things right, to get to the size I did. I didn't really pay attention to fiber and getting rid of waste from my physique. I would just eat enormous amounts of food. No one knew about fiber and detoxification. That's one thing I would have incorporated. And would it have saved my waistline a little better and made it look? Possibly, it might have. So I think a lot of like my problems, abdominally speaking, was not necessarily that I had a protruding stomach at any point. It was that the fascia stretched out down there. Kind of like what Phil Heath is trying to fix now on his body, which he's never going to. They can sew it together all they want. Once it stretches out, you lose that. You lose the ability to hold it in as much. And I think that was because of the enormous amount of food. And if I had used a fiber supplement and been eliminating food faster from my waste products, maybe I wouldn't have gotten as much distension down there. So that would probably be, as far as training goes, I was pretty good at training. I took days off, and I think my training was really optimized at a certain point in my lifting, and I think that's why I got such good results too.
No, it makes sense, yeah, because your genetics, you overcame them in a lot of ways. You wouldn't have overcame them to that level unless you were getting more things right than wrong. That makes a lot of sense. That's actually a good segue for a question. This isn't really a question, although actually there is a question piggyback with it, but it's initially a thought. Is, even right there, like 2 or 3 times you mentioned fiber. And what I don't think people fully understand or can fully appreciate is the way sometimes because I follow the channel, I see stuff, people always like, man, there goes Dave again, talking about fiber. He's going on and on and on about fiber. This is what I want people to understand. You're passionate, whatever you're passionate about stuff, you're going to get amped up about it, whether it's BMWs or if it's fiber.
Right.
Okay. But what people don't know, people watch Shark Tank. What they don't tell you on Shark Tank is no one ever starts a business, hopefully, about stuff that they're not passionate about, okay?
Right.
So there's a reason why you're passionate about fiber. There's a reason why I'm passionate about mushrooms and superfoods and immunity and all that. And it isn't because they're easy things to sell. That like there's nothing, if you want to make money in supplements, you sell pre-workouts, you sell fat burners, you sell, steroids in a bottle. Like that's the rhythm of like quick fix, easy sell, huge market base. So I want to stress to people that, because I take fiber twice a day, and I think you'll appreciate this little statistic I never heard until recently, that the average person who does Weight Watchers, you name it, any of those programs, Jenny Craig, they typically end up losing, it averages out to $200 for every pound lost. Because the average person spends $600, and after 9 months, they've only lost 3 pounds.
Right.
Whereas if you take a person and you give them 20 grams of fiber a day, they usually lose 5 pounds just in 2 months, just because of all the benefits of the fiber.
Right.
So the point is, if you're at home and you're a little chubby or you're picking at the wrong foods, even if you don't care about the health benefits, eat some freaking fiber, because there's a reason why you only make 10 products or whatever it is you make, and one of them's fiber. Yeah. And it's not because it's sexy, but it's effective. And this is where my question is for you, is the point is, I know you've posted on your channel recently about some stuff that you're doing and all that with the thyroid and everything like that. And you and I exchanged a couple emails where I told you about a situation where I went to the doctor for just kind of a routine checkup, not even a routine checkup, a routine surgery to take a loose body, which is a floating piece of bone out of my knee. They found PVS in there, which you could describe it better than me. But basically they said, if we don't take this out now, you're going to need radiation. If we don't do radiation, you're going to need a knee replacement. And it scared the shit out of me. I never heard of Moffitt. I didn't know Moffitt was a place I go for radiation. And the point is, that was a scary moment for me, and it was very challenging. And as I was walking out of the place, there's a host of emotions that were going through me. But one of the things I went through my mind is, at least I know every day up till this moment, I was doing what I could within my control to prevent bad shit from happening in my life, which is going to happen to most people. So kind of, would you mind walking like me through your own situation? Was this like the scariest thing you ever went through? And how does all this feel for you as we talk about it mentally?
First, just addressing the fiber thing first. If I didn't sell a fiber supplement and I was just an advocate of other people's fiber products, no one would break balls at all. right? It's because because I actually happen to make the thing that I'm actually advocating. In other words, I was advocating fiber before I ever made a fiber product. Back in my muscular development days, I was telling everyone because I had discovered it, that it worked, and it was, made my stomach flatter, and I saw all the health benefits. So when I started Species Nutrition, that was one of the products I always wanted to make. So I happen to just have the best tasting and the best fiber product on the market. So I'm not going to promote someone else's that it's inferior to mine. But the fiber aspect, like you said, is I mean, if you don't take a fiber supplement, you're really doing yourself a disservice, actually. Now, some people have very severe Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, and they can't handle fiber. Aside from those people, everyone should take one. And you know what? Every person I convince to take one winds up becoming a customer because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe how good this stuff works. So, having said that, now when I found out, but having talked about about the cancer thing, when I found out that I had a heart arrhythmia initially from exercising at a high level, when I exercised, I get this weird arrhythmia. That was scary because I allowed them to put a defibrillator in me as like backup. Obviously, it's never gone off or anything like that, but that was a scary thing because I was like, whoa, I don't know. Does this mean I'm going to have a heart attack and die? And then of course, you get used to it and forget about it. But then I found out I had an aneurysm. My aorta was enlarged. That was very scary because I know Chris Dim, who's a good friend of mine, had a dissecting aorta and almost died, and then of course when they fixed his descending aorta, he became paralyzed. So that's not like a surgery that I want to get. Luckily mine is stable right now. Hopefully it never moves from this point. So those to me were more traumatizing because it seems those are much more serious operations. Anytime you hear the word cancer, obviously just like you experience, it could do something to you. And you know what? From losing my mother to cancer to a lot of people in my family that I know, that could be considered traumatizing. For some reason, the thyroid aspect of it, knowing that it's like a very curable one, it was a very tiny nodule I have in here that I'm going to be getting removed tomorrow, believe it or not. And for some reason, I don't know if I'm just in denial or it feels like, you know what, this is something that I can overcome and that maybe I needed to confront that C word so that I could then be an advocate and explain to other people how to mentally deal with this and get through it. Once again, it's the same as anything in life. You come up with a game plan that works, or at least that you think is going to work, and you stick to the game plan. It's like starting a contest diet. You have to have a game plan with your coach, and you got to stick to it. If you start following 18 different things that other people are saying, you're never going to look good on stage, right? Same thing with what I'm going through. If I have a game plan, I have a bunch of good surgeons and my endocrinologists, and we're all working together. We got the game plan. We stick to the game plan. I can do my own naturopathic type of therapies on the side that I've garnished from different people that I've talked to, and I felt that these were the best few to incorporate, to keep my immune system good. Then I'm going to do that, and that's my decision. If someone else doesn't agree with what I'm doing, I don't give a crap. I have people saying, "Don't get the surgery. You can get rid of the stuff on your own." I said, you know what? I can get my thyroid removed. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to sit around waiting for the thing to spread, God forbid. So it wasn't that traumatizing to me, okay? Now, tomorrow when I'm going in there and they're going to remove it, it might become a little more real to me, obviously. And no one wants to go for a surgery. Obviously, I've gone for many surgeries in the past, so I'm kind of a little numb to it, but no one wants to go in and get your thyroid removed. But it is a very superficial type of gland. I've been using this analogy, and I know my wife says it's nothing like that, but really it's like getting gynecomastia removed. It's like a very superficial glandular removal. They make a little incision, very similar to what they make on your nipples, and they cut the gland out. And if the surgeon knows what he's doing, he does a good job. And if he doesn't know what he's doing, he botches it and leaves a couple pieces in there. The good thing about thyroid surgery is if they're going to give me radioactive iodine, it's going to kill anything that they missed anyway. So that's what's going to happen. So once again, I've broken it down mechanistically in my head, and that's how I deal with issues. And I seem to have a game plan that seems like it has a pretty good outcome according to everything I've read and statistics and what the doctor has told me. Now, once they get in there, who knows what's going on? I'm assuming that it's a small nodule. They haven't seen any metastasis to any of the lymph nodes on the ultrasound. Hopefully when they get in there and they remove it, they're going to tell me the same thing. And then once it goes to pathology and they'll we'll go from there. That's the game plan. Obviously, if I had gotten a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, which was what my mother died of, my mindset might be a little different. I might not be so cool about the whole thing. And that's the truth. That's life. I mean, if they tell you I got 6 months to live, because you have a certain, disease, you're going to respond a lot differently than if you got to go to the doctor and get a skin cancer removed from your face, right? So, like you said, the only thing you can do is be as healthy as you possibly can, eating as clean as you can, taking the right supplements, trying to, do everything. The only thing I don't do, and I've said this before, that I would like to do more of is get more sleep. And you know what? Maybe once my kids are in school and we get on a normal schedule, that'll happen. But, that's the only thing I'm not doing that I would like to do a little bit more of. But when you have young kids, I said this before, they come first. And so if they got to get up in the middle of the night and they can't sleep and they don't feel, even if I have only been asleep for an hour and we're getting towards morning, that's my sacrifice I make for the betterment of my kids. And that's what we have to, we have to deal with. If you get depressed over something that's going on in your life and you just fixate on it, it's not good. It's not good to do that, because that's not going to help you get past it. I promise you. That's going to make it worse, because then you're kind of like fixating your we're creators. We're constantly manifesting things. You don't want to manifest more of that negativity, because that's all you're fixating on.
Yep. No, I think, as I interpret it from everything you said, a lot of where your peace of mind, for lack of a better term, comes from is because, and I thought of it when you disclosed all this stuff 2 weeks ago, where a lot more than the average person about, like, hey, there's 20 magical boxes you want to check to be healthy. You naturally check all the boxes. Like, you're doing everything right that a human body can do. And a lot of people don't necessarily live in a world where they execute or know how to execute to that level. So it's kind of like the fiber. It's kind of like the omega-lizer. It's kind of like the stuff I take. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's not about people understanding why something works, but just sometimes you have to trust that there's a reason for it. So, once again, because we're talking about cancer, it's important I mention this real quick to remind people, because we all want to forget certain facts that really there's only 1 or 3 ways most of us are going to go. It's either through cancer, it's either through heart disease, which is what scared you at first, or something with the heart, or then the last of it's going to be the dementia and the diabetes.
Yeah.
You're going to go one of those 3 ways, right? And diet and all that's kind of the dementia route. But the other two, to some degree, you can really control with supplements. Like the omega-lize isn't good just for body fat, it's good for the brain.
Right.
And, a lot of the stuff I make, the immunity stuff, like, I know people, it's so foreign to them, they don't understand yet, but in 10 years, they're going to understand that turkey tail mushroom, agaricon mushroom, these things make your T cells smarter. They allow your T cells to notice. I'll keep it really brief. To most people,
I want to say that I have never stopped taking the mushrooms too the whole time. So, I'm hoping that maybe that's why it never spread. Because this doctor said to me, this has been interesting to me that I didn't think of. Because it's very small, this nodule. So I would assume it just popped up. He said with the calcification on the nodule, he said it's probably been there for a couple of years. It probably has just been at bay. It probably formed, it stopped, and somehow your body halted it. And that's why it's got this shell over it. And because it doesn't look brand new, he said. It looks like it's been there, which is interesting, because if you think if it was there for a couple of years, that it would have been a lot bigger. So I have to believe that the diet and supplementation routine, also the mushrooms that I incorporated, how long ago did you get me on those? About a year and a half ago?
A year and a half ago.
Which could have been when I first got this thing. That could have been holding everything from getting bigger and expanding. Because a lot of people, my friend Greg Tembeck, found his thyroid cancer because he felt it coming out of his neck. Mine is you can't even palpate it. I've been trying to feel it. The doctor couldn't feel it. It's buried in the gland. So it's small and it never really progressed beyond that. But yet it looks like it's been there just by the histological, look of it, that it's been there for a while. So that was interesting. That gave me hope. That said, you know what? Maybe you are doing the right thing, and it just spontaneously popped up. And remember, the thyroid gland is like a filter for garbage. So any like radiation, any kind of like heavy metals you're exposed to, they go there. That accumulates in that gland, pretty readily. And so, who knows what it could have been a genetic thing, in my family that just something turned it on, but evidently my immune system was keeping it from getting very large. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I haven't taken any growth hormone or anything like that for years, but I'm glad I didn't, because that probably would have made it grow faster, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you saying that. Once again, we never talked about this in advance, that
No.
a good immune supplement in the context of cancer, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. For people that don't know, I'm going to give you some education real quick. Your body on average, it's about 10,000 lesions per day in the DNA. That's what it can handle. Once you get over 10,000 lesions, your body can't notice them all, so it can't catch them all. And what happens is that's when cancer starts replicating in certain areas. And unless the body can identify that cancer, the replications continue to occur. So a good supplement or a good regimen or a good diet or good genetics, what they do is it doesn't always prevent something, because what cancer wants to do is cancer wants to trick your body into thinking it's part of the system, and then it needs blood supply. So what Dave's describing is basically at some point his body was able to recognize a foreign entity and then cut off the blood supply so it could no longer grow. Because what it does is once it gets to the blood supply, it grows, and then it tricks the body into releasing itself everywhere else. So that's the point. I'm just saying, like, if you're worried about cancer, if you're trying to not get cancer, think about Turkey Tail. Please think about the products I make, because there's a reason I make them for the brain and the body. And that's all I wanted to harp on with that. Dave, I got one last question for you.
Do we have a coupon code if anyone wants to use, like, go to vavalife.com?
I think it's still RX15. It should be RX15.
15% off, okay. And which, for immune system, which product would you recommend that people purchase?
That's the Monad. I made it for two reasons. I made it for immunity, and I made it for cold sores, because I know 25% of you out there get cold sores, and you don't want your boyfriend or your girlfriend to figure that out. Just take the stuff. It'll get rid of cold sores. Yeah. You won't have them as often. Yeah. And if you do have them, just take like 5 capsules 2 times in a day. It's gone in 24 hours instead of like 4 days hanging around.
What do you think the dosage?
Immunity.
What do you think the dosage is that I should be taking just for, like, for like enhanced T cell immunity?
This is what I would tell anybody, right? If you're just looking for overall health, the Monad's designed perfectly. 200 or 300 milligrams of turkey tail and agarikon is all you need. That's what the cancer.gov research says. There's 27 universities studying it real time. If someone has cancer, we're talking stage 2, 3, 4 kind of stuff, they're going to need like 4 grams a day in conjunction with whatever cancer treatments the conventional medicine's recommending to them. I think sometimes people get lazy when I talk. They think, oh, he's just saying he's trying to, he's like a snake oil salesman. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you use this in conjunction with, depending on what your situation is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people don't have to use it. We're just giving them, look, people have criticized some of the protocols that I said I'm following, in other websites and other channels. And you know what? It's not about you guys. It's about me. It's what I feel comfortable utilizing, because I'm trying these modalities so that if they work, I can then tell other people about them so they can incorporate them. And that's, my whole life has been pretty much that. Experiencing weird, things with my body and training and stuff like that, and working through some unusual scenarios. And I always wondered, why do I always get these weird scenarios? But it always in some way made me a better diagnoser. When people come to me and say, hey, did you ever get this? I'm like, oh, I had it yet. They're like, you did? I can't find any doctor that knows anything about this. What did you do? Well, this is what I did, and this is how I cured it. Oh, thanks, man. I can't tell how many people had problems with squatting, throwing their backs out, knee pain, and I told them to go get custom orthotics for their shoes, and it fixed them. And when I was a runner in college, I couldn't figure out why if I ran more than 4 miles, I would get these terrible groin tendonitis and strains. And I went to every doctor you can go to. They ran bone scans on me, everything. No one could figure it out until I went to this one, guy who was like 24 years old, just graduated med school. He was a doctor. He wasn't a podiatrist. He was actually a medical doctor that was a specialist in feet. And he was the first guy to really start making custom orthotics. They molded my feet. My father spent a fortune. It was like $500. My father almost had a nervous breakdown. But he knew it was important to me, and we didn't know if it would work or not. And sure enough, after about 3 months wearing these things, all my pains went away. I was able to run 10 miles, and it was all because my biomechanics were messed up on my body because I had very flat feet. So, who knew? But that's why it's important that we get these modalities out there and let people try them, And then people can make their own decisions. There's a reason why you're putting it out there. You've done a lot of reading and a lot of studying, and there's been a lot of anecdotal evidence from people saying that they've gotten good results from it. I feel good when I take those mushrooms. I'll tell you, I feel like I don't get sick as much. I feel like enhanced in some way. I don't know. It's the best way. Maybe I have a little more mental focus. I don't know what it is, but I do feel better when I'm on them, and that's why I've stayed on them.
Yep. And yeah, no, I appreciate that. And once again, the beauty is with my stuff, guys, if you want to try it, it's 60-day money back guarantee anyway. So if you think it sucks, you just send me an email and say, Tony, I think this sucks. Give me my money back. And I'll say, deal, no big deal. So
can't go wrong with that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you can't lose. So I think that's going to be it for Dave for this week, Dave. We're running out of time of this installment. Any closing thoughts?
My thoughts are that, and this seems to be the theme of today's show, is that you got to do what resonates with you. In other words, if you watch this show and everything we said resonated with you, then you're on the right path. If it doesn't resonate with you and you feel disgusted by it or whatever, and you don't think then don't listen to it. Okay? Likewise, if you're trying to figure out what to do with your life, if there's something that you can't stop doing, like you're online and all you do is research this one thing, then do it. Then that's what you should do, because something inside of you at this moment in time is telling you that this is important, and it's so important to you that you're going to pour so much energy into it that you're going to become so good at it that you're going to actually be able to somehow translate that into maybe making a living from it, or being an advocate for it, or an information provider. You never know where these things lead. Never ever, because I remember when we were kids, your parents say, don't play those video games, they're going to rot your brain, you're never going to be able to make a living that. Well, you know what? There's guys that make a very good living playing video games now and creating video games now, like multi-millionaires. So do what you like, and guess what? You'll never work a day in your life, and you'll be very rich for it. So that's my parting wisdom.
Peace out.